Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Castillo,
I'm Caleb Horton.
and this is the first podcast of The Assist. This is something that is a year and a half in the making. We had this idea, and we wanted to do a sport podcast, and we just got around to it, so better late than never. And this podcast will cover multiple different sport angles, from high school sports to college sports to the pros. So we're going to have some fun with it.
And you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, both under the same handle. It's The Assist Radio. Later on, probably this month or so, sometime in the future, we'll be having a Facebook page. We'll also have something where you can email us. We'll have a little email where you guys can email questions, or you can mention us on Twitter. We'll have some Twitter polls up, some Instagram pictures. You guys can go and ask us some questions, and we just look forward to interacting with those around us and those in this area, and also those nationally. We look to make this a nationwide thing eventually one day. That's our dream, and we hope you guys can be a part of it.
And as well, you might be thinking, well, why do you listen to these two guys? You can listen to guys on ESPN, and that's true. You can listen to those guys who have that credibility, but if you become a fan of the Assist podcast, we're two passionate guys about sports, and we love to talk about it, and we think we can make this into something pretty big. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. All right, for our first segment, we're going to go break down high school football matchups and go through the scores. There's multiple games that went through South Carolina last night. The first one we see here, we have Bowling Springs. They were able to defeat a Rock Hill team 35-32. Chapman beat Chesney 49-27. Malden 42. Woodmont 7. Greer and Daniel. I was actually at that game, so we'll go into that more in just a second. But Greer was able to beat Daniel, an undefeated school, 42-28. We have Broome 28, Indian Land 21, Woodruff 42, and St. Joseph Catholic 6.
Starting us out here with Hannah beating Belton Honeypath BHP 21-13. Easley and Wren in a shootout. Easley wins 49-32, and Northwestern defeats Burns 34-12. And I actually listened to that game, and we'll get into that along with Greer here just in a moment. Gaffney continues to roll on here as they remain undefeated, and they beat West Charlotte by a total of 43-6. Hillcrest gets back on track here and beats J.L. Mann, which isn't that hard to do, 42-17. And Spartan High continues to roll as they beat and defeat Union County 37-7. So Matt, you were at the Greer game last night. Can you go into detail? Maybe give us some more about Greer and how they defeated the undefeated Daniel team.
Well, it was a good game. It started off. Greer this year has been able to get off to fast starts offensively. They have scored the first touchdown of the game 3 out of 4 games, other than when they played Burns a few weeks ago and didn't score until about 8 seconds left into the game. But once again, you see Greer jump out, take an early lead. He had the running back Quay White. He ran it into the house to make it 7-0, and then from there their offense kind of stalls, and that kind of been a trend from them this season, and Daniel was able to take a 14-7 lead right before the half, and Greer was able to add a touchdown, and the extra point was ended up blocking. So he went in the half losing 14-13, and something like Greer has a young team. So a lot of the times when you face adversity as a young team, you kind of crumble, and that's something that kind of happened to them, especially the first 2 games of the year. But we're starting to see a more tough, resilient group, and last night, in that second half, the game kind of went back and forth, and every time that Daniel would score, maybe retake the lead, Greer had an answer for them, and they were really led by their defense. When you see 28 points, you think, well, how great did their defense play? They're dominant defensively. They have a very good, outstanding pass rush. They stop the run. Now, most of the points that you saw Daniel score were on special teams, so they have some issues that they have to clean up there. But like I said, they were able to overcome a lot of adversity. They had touchdowns that were called back because of holding calls. We saw that last week against Clinton High School with them. Mm-hmm. And then Quay White seems to has everything. I mean, he had 5 total touchdowns yesterday, 3 on the ground, 2 returns. So it was just a tough win against a good Daniel team that's undefeated. It was an upset. A lot of people thought Daniel was going to come in, even at Dooley Field, a tough place to play, and Daniel get the win, but Greer had other plans in mind.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm a little worried about my Burns team. They lose DeMarcus Gregory to an injury. We don't know anything about that injury yet, but it did not look good. And they also lose their safety, their starting safety, to a broken wrist, and he's out for quite a while. And just listening to the game, it went to halftime 6-0. It was quite boring to listen to be honest. But coming out second half, Northwestern, they put it on them. And they did it late, too, which I wasn't necessarily a fan of. When you line up 5 wide and you're already up 20 points with about 5 minutes left in the ball game, and you're throwing, 70-yard shots down the field. I'm not a big fan of that, but I can see where it comes from because Burns in the past has done that to a lot of different teams. Just been able to dominate them in many different ways. And it's like the old saying says, what comes around goes around. And that's true for this Burns team as they struggled. And last night even Brock Carroll, the starting quarterback, the sophomore quarterback, got injured. He seemed to be okay as he came to the sideline. He walked off the field, which is great. But it's never good when your starting quarterback gets injured. And he's faced a lot of adversity this year and pressure. His offensive lines needs to step it up. I really believe that, and got beat pretty bad. Their offensive line was not protecting the quarterback. And Matt, I just want to, as you're a Burns grad as well, what do you think of this? It seems like it's becoming a trend for this team.
It's something that's not seen in a while. If you don't know anything about Burns football, they're used to dominating. Yeah. Their expectations is state championships year in, year out. Even in the years past, they might not have had the greatest team, but they're still competitive. They're still in the running for a state championship. And now we look, and they're 1-3.
And they haven't been 1-3. And I heard the stat this morning. They haven't been 1-3 since 1998.
That just shows you. That's 18 years ago. This is a team that is used to winning. I know they're getting younger. But it might be the end of a dynasty, maybe.
It could be. It could be, absolutely. And I'm afraid of this, but as a Burns fan and just sitting down in the stands, you see fans getting upset with many different players, many different coaches. And I hope that they can stick it through this because I believe this is still a good team. They're just young. They're not, obviously they're not as talented as they have been in years past. But overall, it's a good team. Very good defense. That doesn't show here in this final score, again, as Northwestern defeated Burns 34-12. But I do believe in this team. I believe in the quarterback. I believe in the receivers. It's just that offensive line has just really got to step it up.
And Northwestern now is not a bad football team. And they're 1-3, and it's not like Burns are losing to teams that are not good football teams. They lost to Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach seems to play Burns tough. Every time they match up. A few years ago, Burns had that massive home winning streak, and Myrtle Beach came down and snapped that.
Everett Golson. You can blame Everett Golson for that.
Yeah. Everett Golson was a part of that.
And Myrtle Beach actually last night they just won 70-0.
Yeah, they're a good football team, and Northwestern is not a scrub, and they played who last week?
They played Mallard Creek last week.
Creek
again. And they played a good ball game up there. They only lost by a touchdown.
Yeah, there was a lot of plays that went their way. They could have snuck out of there with the victory.
Absolutely.
It's not that they're a bad team, but these are games, even though they're playing these good quality opponents, that you didn't have a doubt in your mind they were going to win. Right now, they're falling up short.
Yeah, I could not imagine what the fan base and the players and the coaches will think if this team even loses 4 games this year. And I believe they're on pace to lose 5 or 6 games. If you look at the region, if you go through the scores here, Bowling Springs defeated Rock Hill, and Rock Hill is no scrub. And Bowling Springs is obviously no scrub. You go through here, you see Malden, you see teams like...
Do they play Spartan High this year?
They do. They're actually in the same region.
Okay,
Spartan High and Gaffney and Bowling Springs and Burns, and I believe there's a couple of other teams. They're all in the same region. And that's what this year is really about. It's no longer about the point system.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the region and who you play
Yep.
and how many wins you have in the region.
And Spartan High is just, since Coach Miller's taken over there, has really built that program. And they never were a terrible football team, but they seem like they're now at a whole nother level. And then we see Gaffney, another team that Burns plays. It's always good games against Burns. So
Gaffney is my opinion, has really come out of nowhere to come out and defeat a TL Hanna team who come in the beginning of the year was loaded and still loaded. But we heard yesterday and we heard last night reports of TL Hanna losing their best running back, being kicked off the football team for disciplinary reasons, which is a big stunner to this team because he is ultra talented, this sophomore running back for TL Hanna. And but Gaffney looks very good. I don't know if it's something to do with the old reservation, but they look great offensively, defensively. Again, they beat West Charlotte last night 43-6.
yeah, I mean, they have some athletes at that school. And kind of to go back to Greer, a lot of that concern, because Greer, like Burns, has big expectations. The fan base there expects them to win. They're very passionate fans. So there's a lot of pressure for Greer to succeed. And when they come out losing their first game to Westside High School, they got obliterated by Burns at Nixon Field in the second week. And they were able to bounce back last week against Clinton and won a tough football game. And then this win. So they're trending in the right direction. That's another team that seems like they're young, but they're getting together. And that's the same thing for Burns right now. That's the point that I'm making, is that Burns also has pretty young players on their team. Right now they're trending in the wrong direction, but it's a little concerning because what we've seen in the past for them. But I guess there's time. I guess it's still early. So next week though, you're looking at a must-win in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to Greer, being on the sideline for those games with you, I can really tell that their defensive line, like you said, their defense is dominant. We talked to and spoke to Jalen the other day or last week at the game, and he was, hey, I'm not from here, but this is a winning tradition here, and fans expect that.
Yep.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you when it comes to Greer and Burns, both young. One trending in a good direction, one trending in a not so good direction. So as this year goes on, we'll see where both of these teams hold. And during the rest of this year, during this podcast, the high school football season, guys, we just want to let you know that we're not just going to focus and hone in on just these two teams, but these are two topics that we are a part of, Greer football and Burns High School. But we will go through the scores as we talked about here with Bowling Springs and Gaffney and different teams from around the area. So,
and then maybe expand a little bit early on. We're looking to maybe get some high school coaches to come and be a part of the podcast to give us more of an experience that way. But it's something that you mentioned, Jalen Mills, and I actually forgot to mention him in another big game for him. He seems to be a big-time player for the Yellow Jackets. I mean, every time you see the quarterback getting hit, it seems like he's in the backfield.
Number 34 right there in the backfield, yeah.
I mean, you're making plays, so another school that's just used to winning and started off slow, so, we'll see.
Yeah, and next week Burns actually goes to Broome High School,
okay.
And Broome runs the option offense, which is something probably foreign to this Burns defense, and I'm sure that Coach Brian Lane and the rest of the coaches are drilling into their heads as they go into practice next week and probably this weekend, preparing for that rushing attack from Broome High School as Broome defeated Indian Land last night 28-21. Broome High School looks like a good football team this year. They finished 9-3 last year, and this year they look pretty good. I mean, anytime you can bring back a bunch of players that run an option offense, and we see it with Georgia Tech almost every year. They bring back guys, and that offense looks pretty good.
And that's just the thing about Burns' division in general. And I know we're kind of going back and forth about Burns and Greer and throwing in these other schools. But that division that Burns is a part of, it's a tough division. I mean, there are some juggernaut football teams in there. So, it just seems every week there's not too many, this should be an easy win, a cakewalk. They're going to be hard-fought football games. So,
and especially with the emphasis this year on the region and winning region games. You could have style points last year and the years before this and still get into the playoffs. You still had to perform okay in your division, in your region, but this year the region is the most important games. So I think that's a good thing for Burns, losing to teams like Northwestern, in a sense that it doesn't really mean anything for their playoff potential. But it's also a bad sign that they can't beat a team like Northwestern, who is almost equivalent to like a Gaffney or a Bowling Springs or Spartan High, or teams like that.
And I think that's going to wrap it up for the high school segment. So we'll be back, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about college football and everything Saturday has to offer.
Here, going to lead us off in this segment about college football. And we're going to get into the top 25 and the games that we have scheduled for this afternoon. And we're going to go into a couple games that we think will be probably our games of the week, I guess you could say. As we start out here.
Which is not a whole lot of them. Not as good as football as it was last week, that's for sure.
No, by no means. A lot of cupcake games here. A lot of games that you probably don't want to watch, but they'll end up being good games. And I think we're going to find them here. So we start out here with the top 25. Let's go through the list here. Central Michigan's at Oklahoma State. Not much to say about that one. UCF is at Michigan. Not much to say about that one. Lamar at Houston. Where is Lamar? Nichols State at Georgia. Not much to say about that one. Prairie View A&M at Texas A&M. The battle of A&M's there. You guys can figure out which team is the better one. Charleston Southern is at Florida State this afternoon.
This one has something to say about now. A lot of controversy surrounding this game, so we'll definitely get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Troy at Clemson. Can Clemson bounce back from their terrible offensive performance last week? One that's not in the top 25 that I have circled on my list is Utah State at USC. A lot of you guys are probably wondering, why that game? Well, USC got absolutely hammered, as many of you know, last week by Alabama, 52-6. They did not look good. They threw in the towel early. I mean, they were down 17 points, and it was like they were down 50 points. We'll get more into that stuff later. Another one that is not a top 25 game is Ohio at Kansas. And for many of you who don't know, or probably didn't pay any attention to, Kansas last week beat Rhode Island by 49 points. I think it was 55-6, and their fans stormed the field. So my question is to you, Matt Castillo: will the fans storm the field again this week?
Why not?
Absolutely.
Go big or go home.
That's right. Go Jayhawks. Tulsa is at Ohio State. Akron is at Wisconsin, and we'll get into Wisconsin here and a little bit of what we think and what we agree upon is the overreaction of week one in the games. Nevada's at Notre Dame. That could be a dangerous game, I think.
For Nevada, I think, because I think Notre Dame was kind of embarrassed what happened to them last week. So Nevada's not a bad football team, I mean, for what they are. But
yeah, I agree, but I just think it could be a trap game. I think Notre Dame could be looking ahead, trying to bounce back against a bigger and better team instead of Nevada.
And on the road, so
yeah, Nevada is on the road, so we'll see. Western Kentucky at Alabama, not much of a game here. SMU at Baylor. Wofford, our own Wofford Terriers here in Spartanburg County, is going down to Oxford, Mississippi to play the Ole Miss Rebels, and I believe the Rebels will bounce back in that game as well. Idaho at a impressive Washington team. Washington's now number 8 in the country. Who knew that? Florida Atlantic is at Miami, who is now number 25. Yes, sir, the U. Louisiana Monroe is at Oklahoma. Can Oklahoma bounce back? Who is Oklahoma? Why? What is their offense? What is their defense? I mean, this team come into this year with so much hype. Yep. And we'll get to these games in the deeper detail later on in this segment. UTEP is at an impressive number 11 Texas team who also jumped very high in the polls.
We'll get into that. Very shocking, but I am a little biased towards my Texas Longhorns, so I'll take being the 11th team in the country, but still very shocked by that big of a jump, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, I got a couple games here that I have highlighted. My boring game of the week is South Carolina at Mississippi State, and I'm not saying that because I am a Clemson fan. I'm saying that because South Carolina has zero offense.
They're awful.
They're terrible.
They're awful.
Let's go into my game of the week. I think this will be the most fun to watch here. I think it'll be high scoring, even though Arkansas runs a little bit of a different offense than TCU. It's actually Arkansas at TCU. It's a Big 12 and SEC matchup. It's my game of the day, my game of the week. And then let's move down here to a rivalry game. It's Iowa State at Iowa. BYU and Utah. I did not circle that one, but that one just caught my eye. That one looks like it would be pretty good. That's a rivalry game as well. Jacksonville State at LSU. A lot of question marks with this LSU team. Why is their offense the same as last year?
Somebody's on the hot seat.
Somebody's on the flaming hot seat.
Yeah, it's scorching hot.
And then finally, we'll go here to Virginia Tech at Tennessee. Actually, this is a neutral site game. They say it's a neutral site because it's at Bristol Motor Speedway. As many of you know, they anticipate this game to break the attendance record for a college football game at over 140,000 people. And Matt, as we go back here, and just something that caught my eye last night as Louisville played at Syracuse, the final score being 62-28.
Shocker.
Yes, to some. But as we look into this game, and I don't know if you saw any of the highlights, but Lamar Jackson is very dynamic. And a lot of people will say it's because of the competition he's playing. Well, I understand that. But
regardless, but when you pass the ball for 411 yards, you rush for 199 yards, I don't care who you play. That's pretty darn impressive.
Yeah, and let's get this straight. The running back's name is not also Lamar Jackson. He is the quarterback for this Louisville Cardinal team, and he looks very dynamic and very crucial to this team and very important to this team. He's just a sophomore this year, but just watching the highlights of this young man, he's just amazing in my opinion. Matt, did you catch any of the highlights last night?
I actually honestly did not. I was covering a game Friday night for football, so I did not get into it late, but I did see the score 62-28 and didn't think much about it. So.
I believe this young man, if I have this stat correct, Louisville scored 21 points in the first 5 minutes. They scored on a 70-yard touchdown. I think they scored on a 60-something yard touchdown and a 40-yard run. And he accounted for all of those touchdowns. He threw it and he ran it. This young man is very dynamic and is a dark horse for the Heisman. Now, he is got to play better competition, in my opinion, to get to that level, to get to a Deshaun Watson level. And we'll get into Deshaun Watson and what may be wrong with this Clemson team later on. But for right now, this young man is really taking my Heisman vote.
And one of the things that just reminds me is like when Louisville had Teddy Bridgewater there. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Bridgewater was criticized because they don't play some of the top teams in the nation, and I mean, it's awful what happened to Bridgewater. Actually, with the knee injury, but that's another story. But Bridgewater is a pretty solid quarterback, and Lamar Jackson seems to be pretty legit as well. And this Louisville team, in my opinion, is a team that you really got to watch out for. Regardless if they have a tough schedule, they're probably going to be a tough team to beat if they get into bigger games where they're facing ranked teams. They're pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Louisville has to play both Florida State and Clemson this year, and they're actually coming to Clemson, and I believe they may be going into Florida State. I may be wrong on that one, but let's move into a couple of games here. Matt, is there anything this weekend that may catch your eye? A game that you want to watch? Maybe it's your game of the week.
Well, for me, I mean, we look right off the bat. First game we see is Oklahoma State, and the coach has a mullet. So
yeah, Mike Gundy is the man. I tell you what.
I mean, that's pretty exciting stuff. But I look at the Charleston Southern and Florida State game as maybe not because it's going to be a close game. Everybody knows it's going to be a pretty bad beatdown, but it just the controversy that surrounded that. And we'll move along. We'll get back into that as we move down the list. But that's something interesting. Notre Dame, I'm kind of curious to see if they can bounce back. Games like that.
Okay. As we look into the rankings here, and we see that a Georgia team is number 9 in the country after defeating North Carolina last week, and we see also that the Wisconsin Badgers, after beating LSU last week, jumped to number 10, from being unranked to number 10, and then we also fast forward into our schedule here, and we look at Texas, who was unranked, and now is number 11 in the country.
Longhorns.
The Longhorns. What is my personal opinion is we, not just as fans, but people, the pollsters, we overreact to week 1. Texas looked great offensively, but they gave up 47 points.
Shane Buechele for Heisman.
Okay, that's an early draw there. But Wisconsin, Wisconsin, I don't believe they're deserving of that number 10 ranking. They called a neutral site game last week, but LSU had to go to Wisconsin and play in Lambeau Field, which is basically a home game for the Wisconsin Badgers. Let's just set that record straight. And I don't believe they're going to stay at number 10.
No, Wisconsin's just that team that they're tough. They're physical. I mean, they have J.J. Watt's brother on the team, okay? I mean, if you look at him, you want to know what happened. How did J.J. Watt get all the size? But I will give him credit that he has the same motor, at least. But the point I'm making is Wisconsin is a tough physical football team. They always are. They're always a team that comes ready to play.
Power left, power right.
They're looking to hit you in the mouth. That's just the way they play football and makes them pretty intriguing to watch, but I don't think they're worthy of a top 10 team. And I know we're talking about Texas jumping to 11. As big of a Texas fan I am, I think that is a little ludicrous that they go from not being ranked to the top 11.
They beat a very good Notre Dame team.
Yes, and it was much needed because of what happened last year when we played Notre Dame, which it was pitiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and a huge win for Charlie Strong. Something he can really hang his hat on. I think obviously last year beating Oklahoma was a big win, but I think this is something he can really hang his hat on, is to come out early in the year and to look dominant on the offense. I mean, the new offensive coordinator that they got this year looks like he is changing the offense in a way that makes them really competitive and really hard to stop. And Notre Dame's defense, their cornerbacks got torched all night.
It was a long ball. Yep.
It was go routes
a lot. Yep.
It was. Number one for Texas was just absolute go routes the whole time. And Shane Buechele would just throw it over the top, which the guy's got a great arm and a great cannon. But when you're throwing it over the top every play, it's pretty easy. Yeah. And then when they brought in the 18-wheeler package with Swoops. Yeah, Swoops was.
That's what I was trying to think of his name. That's what I was.
Swoops. That guy come in and he was running people over. I mean, the analysts were talking about Swoops and saying he's basically just another running back. And the man's 6'4". He's a man. Yeah. He's 6'4", 250.
I mean, and he was bouncing off tacklers. And what's impressive about Swoops is this was a guy that possibly could have been the starting quarterback this year. Obviously, he has experience playing for the Longhorns, and Shelley's a true freshman. So it appeared that maybe Swoops would be the starting quarterback. So he lost that job. And what stands out to me is he didn't pout. Charlie Strong talked about this and said, we're still going to get you into this game. You're going to be a big part of our offense, our team, our success. And just the way he went about it. He didn't pout, he didn't cry. He went back in there and made plays. He was a big part of that win, especially in overtime when they got down short yardage. I mean, you start from the 25. I mean, they put him in, and all night he was just lowering his shoulder. Yeah, very impressive game for the Texas Longhorns in general. I mean, defensively, that's just a Big 12. Nobody has any defense in the Big 12. Scores are like 100 to like 109. That's just the way it is. We throw the ball and makes it exciting at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's transition here into this Charleston Southern and Florida State games. We kind of flirted with that topic before we started talking about these other things. It's very, to me, and I'm going to give my opinion, and I want you to give your opinion on the situation at Charleston Southern, as the school has suspended up to 30, I think it was 30 players, 14 starters, I believe it was.
One we know.
Yeah, one we know personally. We graduated with and Colton Corn. And he's the wide receiver there at Charleston Southern. It is amazing to me how rigged the NCAA is.
Yep.
For a program to suspend that many players for buying stuff for school when they were told. I mean, these are 18 to 22-year-old kids.
If you're gonna suspend them for, their stupid violations, let them play in this game. And I know this has been talked about. Everybody said, let them play in this game.
Absolutely. Suspend them for another game.
Exactly.
I mean, do what Division I programs do. Suspend them for the games that don't matter.
Playing Florida State, would they have won the game with those 30 starters or no. But the point is, and we've seen it on Colton Corn, one of the players who was suspended, on his Facebook page, talk about that a lot of these guys, we're not the ones going to the NFL. The guys that were about to play Florida State, they're going to have pros in the league. So for us, it's exposure. It's an opportunity to play against some of the best football players in the world, and they're robbed of that opportunity, and it's just not fair.
I mean, they're possibly – the school is possibly robbing these kids of and we've seen this. Different players come from small schools all over the place in the NFL. They're potentially robbing these kids of millions of dollars.
Yep, one game can put you on the map. That's
Absolutely.
For sure.
I mean, my mind it thinks about, my mind goes to and this was not college, but the receiver for the New York Giants, Victor Cruz.
Yes, went to UMass, which is terrible football, but
terrible football. But he got his chance in the preseason, dominated, became a favorite target of Eli Manning.
Don't want to talk about who he dominated. Still hurts me as I'm a diehard Jet fan. And
yeah, New York Jets there.
Game, but yes.
But that's the type of opportunity these kids have for Charleston Southern. Some of their players, some of their better players. I mean, there's no slack.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they went last week.
Pretty decent football team too.
Absolutely. I mean ranked number 3 in the country. Last week went up to North Dakota State, which has won 5 championships in a row, and lost, which I mean is pretty expected. When any team that goes to North Dakota State and plays there, you expect them to lose by the smallest of margin or the biggest of margin. But these kids can compete, and they've shown that. They competed last week with North Dakota State, and this week, who knows, maybe 1 or 2 kids can say, hey, I showed out that week. There were NFL scouts at that game that saw me playing this way, and maybe, just maybe, I can get a call from somebody to maybe not just go to the combine, not have to go to the combine, but to just get a call from someone to say, hey, look, we want you to come in, we want you to work out, we want to see what you can do. But these kids were robbed of that opportunity, and that's crazy to me. These kids are making so much money for this program, for this school, and they're robbed of a chance to make millions of dollars.
I mean, all they did was buy books, pencils, notebooks, and they can't play in a football game. Something's got to be done with the NCAA, because to me, as we talk about it, they just rob these kids. How much money does the NCAA make off of these kids every year?
Oh, it's insane. I mean, you think about March Madness just in general. We'll switch over to college basketball here for a second. You think about March Madness, and you see the amount of money. I mean, it's close to $1 billion in revenue that the NCAA makes, yet they're a non-profit organization. Yeah. Have you seen their home offices?
It's
non-profit.
It's robbery. It's just not right. Something has to be done, because it's just not fair. And I'm not talking about the whole debate that Division I athletes or college athletes in general should get paid. Not going into that, but I'm just talking about things like this. Robbing kids of an opportunity to play on a big stage against a big-time football team. It's sickening, and your heart goes out to these players who did really nothing wrong and get punished.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you think about many of the violations that are just ridiculous. Like football players or any athletic, let's call them what they are. They're athletic students. They're not student athletes. Okay, let's get this straight. Let's set this straight right here, right now. They're athletic students. They're not student athletes. Let's not get into amateurism and all of this stuff. That's another topic, another debate. But some of these kids can't even go out and buy food. And did you know it's an NCAA violation for a coach to go and buy them some Taco Bell? I don't know about you, but I love Taco Bell.
It's good.
And if I'm starving,
it's unhealthy for you, but
if I'm starving,
you only live once.
I can spend $8 and get 9 chalupas from Taco Bell.
Ain't nothing better than that.
Nothing better than that.
Nothing better than that.
But these kids can't have that luxury. People can't buy them food because it's an NCAA violation.
They can't even sell something that they might have earned.
Absolutely.
Something. It's just it's ridiculous.
These kids sign jerseys, and the jerseys get sold. You saw it with Fournette last year when he auctioned off his jersey. Now, he couldn't personally auction off his jersey because that's another NCAA violation. But he signed the jersey. They sold it, and it was, I think, it was close to $1,000 for his jersey.
Flood release victims, people in the Columbia area in South Carolina for that hurricane that was forever away off the coast, but still flooded South Carolina basically. So.
Absolutely, yeah, and that money goes to a great cause. That's a great situation. That's a great cause. I wholeheartedly agree with what Fournette's message was there and what he did. But when it comes to kids signing jerseys and the program getting in return hundreds of thousands of dollars, I mean, think about Nick Saban, okay? Take this for instance. I'm giving you a job offer. You're a coach. All right, you're coming to Alabama, one of the most storied programs in all of Division I football. We're going to pay you $7 million a year. Okay, we're going to buy your house on the lake. That's a multi-million-dollar house. So therefore, you don't have a house payment. We're going to buy you a boat. We're going to buy you all these separate things, and we're still going to give you $7 million a year. But your players, you can't buy them food.
That's just, yeah.
You can't buy them food. You can't go buy them Taco Bell. You can't go buy them Zaxby's.
Well,
that doesn't make, and your pennies, your players don't get a penny. They're playing because they're amateurs. And we can get into this further, but I'm heartbroken for these kids.
Yeah.
It's something that's sensitive to a subject that's sensitive to me, because these kids don't get a chance.
Mm-hmm.
They're potentially losing millions of dollars here.
Yep. And we're going to move away from that and kind of go to the local football games, and we'll start with Wofford and Ole Miss.
Wofford obviously doesn't really have a chance unless Chad Kelly breaks his leg and the whole offensive line.
He's looking like Jim Kelly, so, despite losing to Florida State, but guy can throw the football just a little bit.
Yeah, he can sling it around. He's got good genes. But Wofford travels down to Ole Miss, and I believe Ole Miss will bounce back in a big way, score 40 to 60 points here. But another local game here is Clemson is playing Troy this afternoon, and a little preview of that game. I think Clemson's going to bounce back here. I believe Clemson will go up big in this game, and I think they'll win by 30, 40 points. I mean, this offense just looked like last week to me they were just coasting, trying to get Mike Williams involved in the offense again, because he broke his neck last year and he missed the whole season, and so they want to get him back and get him involved into the offense, because you look at the targets. Renfro caught a touchdown, and Artavis Scott touched the ball, I think, twice. He may have had, I don't think he had any receptions, actually. I think it was a sweep run, or he got a couple targets. He didn't get the ball, which is not normal. I mean, you look at the offense last year; they were dominant when they gave him the ball. And also, Deshaun Watson, as calm, cool, and collected as he is, again, I think he was just coasting.
He made the plays when he had to.
Yeah.
And, I think it was one of those games where, yes, Clemson didn't put up 100 points like everybody was expecting, or it felt like the game was just going to be, 3-score lead or something. It was one of those games that was not well played by Clemson, that's for sure. But it was something that, at least to me, they looked like they had control of the game the whole time. They were able to do what they needed to do. They needed the first down to keep the clock running. They were able to do that. So
let's not discredit the Auburn defense.
Yeah.
This Auburn defense is much hyped coming into this season, and they look great, especially the front seven. The front seven look great. But let's go here to the South Carolina game. They travel down to Mississippi State, who just lost to South Alabama. They're not a dominant FCS program.
Nope.
And Mississippi State lost their home opener to South Alabama. And as we know, South Carolina went up to went up to Vanderbilt last week and won in a close one, a boring close one.
Yep.
But they won in a close game against Vanderbilt. What do you? What's your take on this game here as South Carolina travels down to Mississippi State?
Well, it's going to be a boring game both ways. Don't think much of South Carolina. And look, if I get into the whole in-state battle of Clemson and South Carolina, and people ask who I pick, I root for South Carolina because I think they're the underdog. So when I'm bashing them, I guess, like this, it's not because I'm a Clemson fan or something. It's just the reality is they're not a very exciting football team. They were able to win the game against Vanderbilt 13-10. And listening to people on the radio talking about how they're encouraged about the way they looked, just stop.
Yeah.
Just
yeah,
please stop. You're okay, Vanderbilt. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Cool.
Vanderbilt's they're solid on defense.
Yeah, but there's nothing that special about them. I just think they don't have a lot. I mean, I think Will Muschamp may be a decent coach for their program. I mean, you kind of look what their basketball team did. They got Frank Martin, who's a drill sergeant, and he's built that program.
Absolutely.
Well, Will Muschamp is also a drill sergeant, so he may be able to build this program back to something, but don't expect much from South Carolina this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you could say that for the next 2 years. I think this year they'll go to a bowl game. I think they'll win 6 games. I think they'll win one or 2 games that they're not supposed to, because, and I don't think it's the Clemson game by any means, but because they have to travel to Death Valley, the real Death Valley, this year. But this game for me, like I echo just about everything you say when you talk about this game. It's going to be boring, low scoring SEC game. Mississippi State, again, showed last week they have not a whole lot offensively. They only scored 20 points against South Alabama. But again, this game, and I agree with you, don't expect anything out of the Gamecocks this year. I don't have high expectations. I don't think a lot of people did, but for those who are the diehards out there, let's just be honest with ourselves. Let's look at the roster. Let's look at the players, and let's not expect much out of these Gamecocks this year.
And really quick, you call it the game of the week, or in your opinion, Arkansas or TCU. Just give us a little bit why you think that is.
Well, I think TCU last week they played, I think it was South Dakota State, and they were in a shootout. I believe the final score of that one was around, I think it was like 51-35 or 45, somewhere around there. It was a very high scoring game last week, and it's just going to be cool to see two very different offenses. Arkansas, as we both know, Brett Bielema was the Wisconsin coach. Power left, power right, and they're going to punch you in the mouth with a giant offensive line, a quick running back, a power running back, and a quarterback who can control the game. But I'm going to think opposite here. I think this game's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be TCU winning by the slightest of margins, and I think they're going to win around, I'm going to say the final score will be 35-31, somewhere around there. I think Arkansas will have the ball last, but will not be able to get into the end zone because of their offense. If you get this team, it's just like Georgia Tech. If you get this team down,
they're not built to come back.
They're not built to come back. They're not built to run 2-minute drills and win the game.
About Georgia as well, just a little side note. They like to run the ball with Chubbs, but don't have any quarterback.
And there's much hype around Jacob Eason. Again, let's give him some time. He's a freshman, number 1 quarterback in last year's class. So let's give him some time to develop as the season goes along. Again, they play in the SEC East. So as far as competition, you got Tennessee, and I'm not sure of the rest of their remaining schedule, but they're playing Nicholls State today. Surely to goodness Jacob Eason could get rolling today against an FCS opponent. And let's transition here to
Tennessee.
Yeah, to the Tennessee game. As we look here and we say, man, 140,000 people, neutral site. And it's 140,000 people, and majority of them are going to be Tennessee fans. Let's just be honest here. As we look at Tennessee, they dropped. Even though they won against Appalachian State last week, they dropped to number 17 here in the polls. They dropped from 9 to 17, dropped 8 spots. Matt, what are your impressions on Tennessee going into this game? What do you think they're going to do tonight against these Hokies?
Well, I don't think Virginia Tech is a bad football team. I think this will be a pretty decent game, but I think a little bit overreaction from Tennessee. Last week, yes, they didn't play well, but you can say that about a lot of good football teams that just didn't play well. Tennessee played an App State team, and whatever it is about App State, that's a team you don't want to play week 1.
No,
I mean, you could just ask Michigan a few years ago what happened there. So, that's a dangerous team to play week 1. Yes, on paper they should have killed them. They didn't. But
I mean, let's look at App State here. I mean, last year or the year before was their first year in Division I, and then last year they went 11-2.
Yes, they're
so
not a bad football team.
They're a good football
team.
team.
And they recruit around this area.
Yeah,
as well.
and including
they get good quality football players.
And we look at this area and we see the players that are missed. And we look at a guy like from Greer, from Jalen. I'm not sure if he has any offers yet, but this young man is dominant.
Their offensive tackle, Noah Hannons, does. He has an offer from App State, a pretty good football player, guy that's physical, just wants to hit somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw that.
Yeah, I mean, throwing people out of bounds.
He did the Michael Orr and carried a guy halfway down the field a couple weeks ago as Greer took on
the
Clinton.
guy looked scared to death. Like, what are you doing? So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But as we look at this week again, as we kind of recap this week of college football, we kind of close this segment out. Not a very exciting week as far as big games and matchups. But overall,
it's college football.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, we saw last week Appalachian State, took Tennessee down to the wire. If it wasn't for a fluke play there at the end from Tennessee, and we see many different controversies with Charleston Southern and how these things will play out as they take on Florida State. But overall, I think for the top 25 this week, I don't think a whole lot of upsets. I think if any, and I'm gonna go on record here, and I know we don't have very many listeners. But I'm going to go on record right here with you, Matt, and I'm going to pick Jacksonville State I think they're going to beat LSU. At LSU, at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, at night. That place is going to be rocking.
If it happens, Les Miles, he will be unemployed. For sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, Jacksonville State, they're no slouch either. I mean, some of these FBS opponent or teams, they schedule these FCS teams, and it's almost like they don't know how good they are. I mean, Jacksonville State's got, I think I heard it correctly this morning, they got up to 8 former SEC players who obviously got into trouble and had to transfer. But when you have 8 SEC players, I mean, Jacksonville State's got the better quarterback on the field tonight. Let's just be honest here. For whatever reason, Brandon Harris, who is as God-given ability, is through the roof with this guy. You see him on the sidelines. He can absolutely sling the football. But for some reason in this offense, it just doesn't work. You know, you go to the left to what's the running back's name? For LSU.
Fournette.
Fournette. Yeah, you go left to Fournette, you go right to Fournette, you go in the middle to Fournette, and then you expect him to drop back when it's 3rd and 10 and throw the ball, you know, either throw a screen or throw a little hook route for 10 yards. I mean, if you don't put confidence in your quarterback, and you don't allow him to get outside of the playbook and make some plays. Again, that's my upset this week is Jacksonville State.
Really quick, because we're
LSU.
about to wrap it up. Really quick, in maybe 15, 20 seconds each. The SEC last week, 7-7. People may be thinking, oh, they're in a dominating football conference. No more overreaction, yes or no?
Absolutely overreaction.
Yeah.
Week 1, let's just take it week by week here. It's week 2. Let's let these things develop. Freshman quarterbacks, new players. Week 1, I believe Tennessee will bounce back. But yes, absolutely overreaction by the media and many different pollsters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back here. Caleb Horton, Matt Castillo here. As we go into our next segment here, we're going to be talking some NFL football, some some fantasy football projections, who we think is going to be good. Let's go ahead and dip in here to the game that happened Thursday night between the Panthers and the Broncos. Matt, what is your take on that game last night? What did you take away from that game?
Well, as a Super Bowl rematch, it's very exciting, even though the Broncos look very differently without a Peyton Manning. Definitely did not know who their quarterback was going to be very early on in the offseason as Osweiler left for Houston. And I thought this was a game that the Panthers should have won. They have basically same team in place while the Broncos have changed. And yes, Broncos still have a great defense. So I wasn't sure about what Simeon was going to be able to do, Trevor Simeon, and so I felt
you
like,
along with everybody else didn't know.
That was a big thing. How is he going to play? And you know, we look at Denver. We know what they're going to try to do. They're going to put their defense, and the defense is going to have to try to stop everybody. Offensively, they're going to try to run the football, and then Simeon's going to have to be the guy to take care of the football, which is why Mark Sanchez is not the quarterback because he's an interception machine.
And not to mention, I mean, Cam Newton got absolutely destroyed.
That is true. Yes, he did
several times.
It was a physical game in general, and a lot of
absolutely.
people are, you know, it's one of those things though. It's people complain that it's football, we're not hitting people, and then when it becomes physical, everybody's crying about the hits.
Yeah,
it's what do you want? What do you want, people?
Yeah.
You know.
Let's dip into our other games here. Let's go right here. Let's go with the Buccaneers are playing the Atlanta Falcons. The Vikings are playing at the Titans. The Browns are playing at the Eagles. The Bengals at the Jets. And we'll get to that one just in a moment here. Raiders at the Saints. Chargers at the Chiefs. Bills at the Ravens. Bears at the Texans. Packers at the Jaguars. Dolphins at the Seahawks. And that kicks off our first 4 o'clock game at 4:05 Eastern Time. Giants at the Cowboys at 4:25. Lions at the Colts at 4:25. And then the Sunday night game on NBC is the Patriots against the Cardinals. And they'll be at Arizona. And as we step into our Monday night games, we have 2 of them here, 7:10. On ESPN, it's the Steelers at the Redskins. And then following that game at 10:20 is the Rams at the 49ers. Matt, as we look back here at the schedule, what are some games that interest you, and why do they interest you?
Well, number one, we look and we see my New York Jets against the Cincinnati Bengals. But not trying to show bias here. This is a matchup that is intriguing. Because if you look, there's a lot of question marks that fill one, the New York Jets, and kind of the Bengals as well. Last year, if people remember, there was a point that the Bengals were 9-0. Looked like they were going to be a serious threat, and of course you have the whole, well, I can't win a playoff game anyway, so, they'll just blow it. And it was kind of a freakish injury that happened to Andy Dalton, that he had a thumb injury and missed the rest of the regular season, missed the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of get back on track. Obviously, they're not going to have Tyler Eifert, who's recovering from an ankle injury that he suffered, I believe, in the Pro Bowl game.
Yeah. That hurt some fantasy owners this week.
Oh, yeah. And then when you look at the New York Jets, this is a team that last year, season ended in heartbreak as losing Week 17 in Buffalo that knocked them out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So much controversy this year, or in the offseason, I should say, about Ryan Fitzpatrick and how he took forever to sign a contract. And to me personally, that puts pressure on him.
Yeah.
Because you fought with the Jets over your contract situation. I can understand some of it. And, it turned into a soap opera, really. But if you waited that long and you kind of got the deal that you wanted and you're happy with, obviously, that you signed it and you want to be here, well, guess what? This is New York.
Mm-hmm.
We know. I'm a big supporter in Fitz. But if he is not able to get the job done, he's going to be torn apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's going to be torn apart.
Because waiting out that long, you're saying to the team, look, whatever contract that you offer me is not good enough. I want my own contract because I am good enough to lead this team to the playoffs and maybe make a playoff run and go to the Super Bowl. Because if you look at the numbers last year, he had a career year. Everybody knows that. But it's under this offensive coordinator where it's Chad Gailey that he has as offensive coordinator, and he is performed very well both in Buffalo and in New York under this system. And not to mention, he's got weapons galore.
It's a lot of weapons for the Jets. You have Brandon Marshall, Decker. We don't have a tight end. We don't really need one. We'll use Quincy and Menwa as a hybrid tight end receiver. But we have young guys that emerge in the preseason, such as Robbie Anderson, Jalen Marshall, Sharon Peake from Clemson made the roster as of right now.
And not to mention you added Matt Forte.
Matt Forte is a dynamic player.
Who's basically a receiving running
back. And
Bly
Powell, the backup, is pretty solid himself.
Yeah, very, very cut. He makes a lot of cuts, and he's very dynamic.
But the thing about this week and this matchup, I think surrounds Darrelle Revis.
Yeah.
A lot of talk he's done. He's not a shutdown quarter no more. Revis Island, you can get off of that. And some people said, well, go play free safety or something.
I think DeAndre Hopkins had something to do with that.
And Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, and Sammy Watkins, yeah.
And Darrelle Revis, I don't think he's too happy about it. I think, and he's even said, I got something to prove. And guess what? Right off the bat, you have Mr. A.J. Green. You're going to be facing him a lot. And the Bengals are going to throw the football. Andy Dalton had a lot of success last year throwing. You have Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard as running back. They're not running on the Jets defense. I don't care even if Sheldon Richardson's not playing in this game. They're not going to run the football.
Yeah.
They're going to try to pass it. Darrelle Revis has an opportunity to shut some critics down this week, or shut them up this week.
Absolutely. As we look forward here to our first 4 o'clock game on Sunday afternoon on CBS, it's the Dolphins at the Seahawks, and many of you know why this game is interesting, as the Seahawks have come out and said as a team they're going to support the national anthem in a way nobody really knows what they're going to do, but they're going to do it as a team, which I look forward to because it is 9/11. And also, that's the controversy surrounding the 49ers game on Monday night. We all know this. But what I'm intrigued about this game is to see Russell Wilson. If you look back last year at the last half of his year, and this is the reason why I took him in fantasy, he absolutely dominated defenses, both running and throwing.
Yep.
This guy
gets better and better.
He's got the keys to this offense now. With beast mode gone, he doesn't have to. The offensive coordinator probably doesn't feel like he has to please Marshawn Lynch. He's got the keys now, and the reason I think he's probably going to be one of the better quarterbacks this year, not just stats, but in wins and MVP votes, is because he finally has the keys to the offense for this guy to really expand and show all of his abilities to throw the ball and to run the ball. One game that you mentioned, Matt, was the Giants at the Cowboys.
Always a good game. It's a little bit different once again because Tony Romo seems to, he can't remain healthy. I mean, anytime he gets touched now, you touch him with a finger, something broke.
Yeah.
So it's his back again. So Dak Prescott is going to be taking his starting spot, and it's something to me that the Cowboys looked like to be a team that I really thought were going to have redemption here. As disappointing as last year was with all the injuries, Des Bryant was awful. Just ask my fantasy team about that. And I kept him this year, which is scaring me now. But the bottom line is, this is, and we'll get into it in just a second when we predict the champions of each division and wild cards and all that, but it's a wide open division in the NFC East. The Giants, they have potential to be pretty good.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
This is a good rivalry, hard football game. But it's going to be interesting to see how Prescott is able to play, and he has Ezekiel Elliott, which we know another rookie with that good offensive line. They're going to try to run the football. The Giants, to me, can't stop the run, but they may be better at that now by bringing in Damian Harrison, or AKA Snack. So So it should be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I think what's going to be intriguing is seeing Ezekiel Elliott. A lot of people have said that he was their best pick, the best draft pick they've taken in a long time. Take out the offensive lineman, obviously, that they drafted a few years ago. But, last year it's the same offensive line. And I understand they didn't have a quarterback, but they should have been able to run the ball a little bit. You think about Adrian Peterson, as dominant as he is, his offensive line is very good, and teams would pack the box, 8, 9 players in the box and leave their corners on an island to try to stop Adrian Peterson and that offensive line, and they could not do it. Now, I know Adrian Peterson is another beast. He's an alien, basically. But they couldn't run the ball last year. And so I'm curious if Ezekiel Elliott fits that offense. I know he can. I know he's very talented. I know he's a downhill runner, just like DeMarco Murray is.
Mm-hmm.
Makes one cut and you better get out of his way. And if he doesn't run over you, he's going to break your tackle and he's going to the house. And so that's what intrigues me. And also Odell Beckham Jr. How is this guy not intriguing? Is he going to make another circus catch? How many touchdowns is he going to have? How many yards is he going to have? And just the overall, the new look Giants defense, as they replaced so many different players on defense, especially on
a lot of new players,
especially on that defensive line. And it would be cool to see JPP and what his hand is able to do against that offensive line.
Yeah, we sort of limited last year, so he'll be a full go. But we'll be moving on to really quick, just touch the Patriots and the Cardinals, and
get to
as
see
a Jet
Garoppolo.
fan, I'm very excited that Brady won't be on the field, at least if it's 4 weeks, and I honestly think this is not going to be much of a football game. I think the Cardinals are going to obliterate the Patriots.
That's a bold statement.
To me, if Brady's not behind center, they got nothing. They got nothing.
They look pretty good with Matt Castle.
Okay.
Oh, he did have Randy Moss.
He did have more weapons. Okay, I can say that. That was another 10-win team that did not make the playoffs. But to me, Arizona's a good football team. They're going to win about 12 games this year.
Let me ask you this: does Carson Palmer still have it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but again, he's another situation where he has weapons. David Johnson, a running back. He has
John Brown on the outside. Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd. He doesn't throw it too much at the tight end, but when you got those 3 guys,
I took him in fantasy. I think he'll have another good year. I know last year against the Panthers in the playoffs, he kind of looked like his career was over. It was awful, but I think he'll have it. But we're going to move on really quick, and something you want to really get into, the Josh Norman versus Antonio Brown and the Steelers and Redskins in the first game on Monday night. So break that down.
I'm excited, and we can transition here into our fantasy football talk because I'm a huge Antonio Brown fan, not just because he's on my fantasy team, because he's undersized, because he was underestimated. They drafted him out of Central Michigan. And, he put up big numbers, but, again, it's Central Michigan. Mm-hmm. What's the competition like? And this guy has come into the league. And I know he wasn't super productive his first couple years, but he's an alien. Him and Adrian Peterson are on this little spaceship. And they fly down from another planet for football season, and then they go back to their planet. This guy is insane. And this is intriguing because Josh Norman has come out and talked so much trash He had one good year. I understand the year before last year he had a good second half, but I think he's more of a system quarterback. I read a report where he's coming out and he's going to shadow Antonio Brown a little bit. Let's be honest. It doesn't matter who you throw at Antonio Brown. If Big Ben is still back there, he's getting 10, 12 receptions, and he's getting a touchdown. Guaranteed. Let's just go ahead and write it down on the stat book. The guy's getting at least 10 to 20 targets. I mean, not to mention the Oakland game last year where he had, 16 receptions for 200-something yards and 3 touchdowns? Mm-hmm. It's insane. And I believe, and I know some of our listeners may be, Redskins fans or maybe Josh Norman fans, but Josh Norman's going to get exposed on Monday night because he's going to be going against the best receiver in the NFL.
And he also doesn't have those other guys on defense, with the Panthers. They obviously have a really good defense. Have guys like Kuechly, Thomas Davis. Yeah. The Redskins, they don't have those kind of guys. So I don't think Josh Norman is going to be a lockdown corner. I think he'll be okay. I think he'll be somebody you could have on your football team. But I agree with you. I think Brown is going to dominate this matchup. And I don't think this game is going to be very close either.
Yeah, I think the Steelers, as long as Big Ben stays healthy in this game and throughout the year, I think the Steelers will be a dominant offense this year. Well, let's go ahead and let's transition here into our fantasy football talk here for just a moment, Matt. Let's give our best players this week at each position. So we'll go through the quarterback, the running back, the tight end, the defense, and wide receiver as well. So, Matt, let's start out with a quarterback here. Who do you think is going to come out week 1 and play extremely well?
Well, to me, I think, there might be better matchups where a quarterback is going to have a better week. But to me, personally, for this whole year even, I look at the Indianapolis Colts. I know they're playing Detroit. And I think the Colts should be able to win that game. But I think Andrew Luck, to me, is a guy that's going to have a bounce-back year. Mm-hmm. So I think I'll definitely take Luck as my quarterback to take.
Okay. Well, for me, I'm actually going to take, as I just, basically torched Josh Norman, I'm going to take Big Ben. I mean, look at the weapons that he has around him. He is going to be – last year I had him on my team for fantasy, and he easy, 30, 40 points every week. This guy, as long as he stays healthy, that's his big issue. But I think this week Big Ben is going to be dominant against the Redskins. Let's transition here into running back. So, Matt, who is your pick this week for running back?
My pick for running back this week, and I'll take Lamar Miller with the Texans against the Bears. And the reason why is Lamar Miller has been waiting years to actually get to touch the football because, the Miami Dolphins, for whatever reason, they didn't give him the football.
Yeah.
So I think Houston's going to have that balanced attack offensively, in my opinion, now that they have somebody they feel is going to be a solid quarterback in Brock Osweiler, but he's still young. They're going to look to run the football, so I'll take Lamar Miller.
And I think the show this week in week 1 at the running back position will go to Todd Gurley. They're going to work him a lot. Obviously, he's going to get the carries. He's going to get the touches. I think 20 to 25 touches easy if the Rams want to win this football game. I understand the 49ers are not the greatest team in the NFL. They're not the best team in the NFL, but they're still an NFL team. So let's give them a little bit of credit here. And last year, towards the end of the season, Blaine Gabbert looked okay in the 49er uniform. Totally new offense. New defensive players, new receivers. The 49ers have a lot to change in Chip Kelly's first year as the head coach there in San Francisco. Well, let's move on here to the wide receiver position. And Matt, who do you think this week will show out for fantasy football at the wide receiver position?
I think, once again, I'm just going to take the Texans. I guess I'm on their little bandwagon right now. DeAndre Hopkins. I think DeAndre Hopkins had a monster year last year. And I think he's getting ready to take over as the top receiver. And I know Antonio Brown is still there. I do. I think Antonio Brown is the best receiver. But Hopkins is going to take that pretty soon. And I think week 1, I look for him to have a big week. I think maybe somebody like Brandon Marshall from the Jets because he always seems to have big numbers for the Gangrenes, but I'll take Hopkins.
Okay, I'm just going to be honest and straightforward. I'm going to take Antonio Brown here, as again, and I've already stated why. He's going to torch Josh Norman. and I believe he's gonna have a couple touchdowns, around 10 receptions, and probably around 150 yards receiving in a monster fantasy day for this guy.
It's Monday Night Football, so.
Yeah, Monday Night Football. Let's transition to the tight end position. Matt, who do you have as your big time number one fantasy football tight end?
Well, everybody's probably thinking, well, Gronk, because he's the only tight end in the league that seems to actually matter. But I will pick Delaney Walker. I mean, this guy. A lot of people just don't really pay attention to how good of a tight end he really is. Part of that he's on a bad team, but I look for him to be a monster all year and have a good week this week.
Okay, I'm actually going to go on a whim here, and I want you to bear with me, because this guy has untapped potential. He's been in St. Louis his whole career. He's out of the University of South Carolina, and now he's playing with Aaron Rodgers. And I'm going to pick Jared Cook from the Green Bay Packers. I like his matchup, and I like his skill level, and I think Aaron Rodgers gets the best out of each and every receiver. And that offense, when you look back and you see like a Jermichael Finley, and when Aaron Rodgers had a good tight end, he was very productive and very dominant. And I think Jared Cook is going to come out this week at Jacksonville, and he is going to tear it up. I really believe it. I think he's going to have a touchdown and around 6 or 7 receptions this week in Jacksonville. So Matt, what do you think this year as far as what are some of your projections for teams, the playoff, the divisions as we go into the division here? Who do you think is going to win the division? What's the playoffs going to look like? What's maybe your Super Bowl pick if you're ready to make that? And maybe we can go into some of the MVP awards, offensive players, defensive players. Who are you looking at this year?
I mean, for early Super Bowl picks, I really haven't thought too much about it, but I'm looking at the 6 teams from both conferences that are going to make the playoffs, and I'll think the Green Bay Packers will win the NFC North. I think the West would be won by the Cardinals. And I think the NFC East, to me, is just so wide open. It's so hard to pick. Right now, I'm still going to lean towards the Cowboys to win it. And then the wild cards would be the Seahawks and the Vikings. Even if Sam Bradford is starting as their quarterback, I think they get in.
Okay. All right. What about the AFC? What are you looking at for the AFC?
The AFC, I got, as much as I think the Patriots are going to get beat up this week, I still just, it's painful to say, but they are still the team to beat. So I think they win the AFC East. In the North, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Out in the West, to me, it'll be the Chiefs. I think they beat the Broncos. And then the wild card teams, I don't see Denver making the playoffs. I know they looked really good or against the Panther team and beat them, and they still got that good defense, but I have the Jets in one of the wild card, and for the other wild card, I have Houston winning the South Division, but it could be the Indianapolis Colts. It could be the Broncos, but to me, I think the AFC is more wide open, and kind of like it was last year. There's going to be multiple teams right there, so it's kind of tough to predict where each team will be.
All right. Well, I'm gonna agree with you on most of those. I've got the Packers winning the NFC North. I've actually got the Giants winning the NFC East this year. I think their offense is super talented, and their defense, I think, will rise to the occasion this year. I've got the Seahawks winning the West. I think they're going to come out. As I said, Russell Wilson's going to dominate. I think this defense will be dominant as always. And I'm actually going to go with a surprise picker. I'm going to pick the Saints to win the South. I think the Panthers, they're not going to be as great as they have been. Obviously, last year it's hard to compete with a 15-1 season, and I think they're going to feel that pressure. And I think Cam Newton, as he always does, he's going to go out. He's going to be very good, but I think he's going to actually take a step back this year in the NFC. I'm going to look at my wild card. I'm actually going to go with 2 teams. 2 teams from the South to make the NFC South to make the playoffs. I'm going to go with the Falcons. And obviously I said the Saints are going to be the winners of the division. But I think the Falcons will make the playoffs as a wild card spot. And I also think the Cardinals. They're a very good football team. They got kind of a top-heavy division. It's basically them and the Seahawks. I think, again, the Seahawks will beat them out, and I think the Cardinals will still be 11-5, 12-4, somewhere around there. I think they'll win the wild card spot. As far as my AFC, how it shapes up, I've got the Texans winning the South. I've got the Chiefs winning the West. I've got the Patriots winning the East, and I've got the
Yeah, it's tough to think about because again, I think the East is just so open. I mean,
Yeah.
it could be like I said, the Broncos. I think their offense though does scare me. I just don't think every week they're going to put up big numbers. You know, I know they had 21 points against a decent or not more than a decent defense, but in the Panthers, I just. You know, the Colts, I mean, people might say, why the Colts? Well, look, they were in the AFC Championship game a few years ago. I mean, so.
Yeah, and I've got the Steelers winning the North and my wild card spots. I'm going to take your Jets as one of those spots in the wild card. And I'm also going to take the Bengals. I think the Bengals will be good again this year. I think they'll make the playoffs, but I don't think they'll go very far.
Yeah, and that's another team
as they
I
have in the
mentioned. Yeah,
past.
you're right. That's another team because, like I said, I mean, I can't stress it enough. It's a tough AFC East.
Yeah, and my Super
Or
Bowl
AFC
pick,
division.
again, I'm kind of along the lines with you. I haven't thought about it a whole lot, but I will go ahead and make my Super Bowl projection, who I think will be in the Super Bowl this year. Again, first week, I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks. They're going to be representing the NFC. And out of the AFC, and I know you're not going to like this because you are a Jets fan, I got to go with the Patriots. I know Tom Brady's going to be out 4 games. He's probably going to come back kind of slow, but they have dominated the AFC East for a long time.
Yeah, it's hard to go against them when they just keep winning. So
Yeah, and again, I think that's the whole thing. The Brady effect, man. He is a dominant football player, probably the greatest quarterback of all time. As we transition here and we go into our next segment, we're going to be going into some Major League Baseball. We're going to be talking about the division races and also the wild card races. We hope you guys enjoy.
welcome back, everybody. The final segment of the assist. We're going to talk a little bit about MLB baseball and the divisional and the wild card races, and then we'll wrap it up. We'll go Yankees. But we will wrap it up with our final thought segment as well. We'll combine it all into one where we're going to talk about the best thing we saw last week and the worst thing we saw last week. So we'll jump right into it, and this will be a pretty fairly quick segment. MLB, we're going to focus on the close wild card race that we're seeing in the American League. You have multiple teams right now that are in the running for that. Right now you have the Orioles, you have the Blue Jays that have the 2 wild card spots. Right there, though, are the Detroit Tigers, the New York Yankees, the Houston Astros, the Seattle Mariners. So it's getting interesting as we get down the stretch. I mean, we look at a team like the New York Yankees about a month ago, and as a diehard Yankee fan, I said, well, this is it. Well, I'm okay with it. We're trading our best players. We're not going to make the playoffs this year. We're building a dynasty for the future. But now that you look, the New York Yankees are just 1 game out of a wild card spot because these young talents they have called up are helping this team win, and they just look like a totally different ball game. Detroit, Justin Verlander seems to be the old Justin Verlander. That's something he has not done in the last few years. He hasn't pitched very well. He's a guy that is having a big year, pitching in big games, and getting the job done. Maybe just because he's getting married to Kate Upton, my wife that he took from me. I don't know what it is, but he seems to have success this season. But we got good baseball left, and one thing you look at, especially with the teams in the American League East, they're about to really start getting into each other and playing each other. So it's going to be an interesting race, and just give you a little quick projection or a prediction of the teams that I think will get those wild card spots. I see Toronto still winning the division and passing the Red Sox. I see the Red Sox getting in. And, I mean, people can say this is biased, but I honestly believe my New York Yankees are going to find a way to get into the playoffs. And I'm excited. I'm ready to go, but we'll move on past baseball, and we're going to move on to our final segment, which is our final thoughts. And Caleb, what was the best thing you saw this week in sports?
It kind of dipples into last week as well. But this week, the best thing I saw was Travis Rudolph, the wide receiver for Florida State. The picture that hit the internet and hit social media last week of him eating lunch with someone who was by themselves. For a young man in college to play football, to have the stature that he has, to sit down with somebody and take the time to talk to him is probably the best thing that I saw last week.
The best thing for me would be James Conner, the running back from Pittsburgh University. Last year, his season came to an end because he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And just the attitude that he had going in with his battle for cancer, just kept such a positive mindset and just said, this is not going to beat me, and I'm going to beat this. I'll be back on the field. And within 6 months, he beat cancer, and he was out there playing last week, and he scored 2 touchdowns in the game. So that was very inspiring to see. And now, Caleb, we're going to ask you, what is the worst thing that you saw last week?
We spoke about this during the show earlier. It's Charleston Southern and the whole situation that went down with the suspension of the football players. Again, we talked about that for a good little bit. That was the worst thing I saw last week. What they potentially took away from those kids is easily the worst thing that I saw last week. Matt, what is the worst thing that you saw? You said something about a Florida State running back.
Dalvin Cook. I mean, I know it doesn't really matter now that they came back and they beat Ole Miss, but. And Dalvin Cook, don't get me wrong, a Heisman hopeful, a guy that's an outstanding player. But he caught a pass last week, and he literally could have walked into the end zone. He could have went to the locker room, used the restroom, got something to eat at the concession stand, and still would have scored. That's how much time. That's how he was by himself.
Yeah.
And before he gets to about the 3-yard line, he goes to switch the hand. I don't know what he was thinking, and he dropped the ball. He fumbled the ball, nobody was around him, and they didn't score. I mean, it turned out to be a 4-point swing. He was very fortunate the ball didn't go into the end zone and out of bounds. It just went out of bounds off to the side. So Florida State did get the ball back. They weren't able to put up 6, but they did get a field goal out of it. But just to steal a little bit of a segment of ESPN, come on, man.
Exactly. Well, we appreciate your time and listening to our first ever episode of The Assist podcast. Again, you can catch us on Twitter and on Instagram at The Assist Radio. We will be having a Facebook page later on, an email where you can drop in your thoughts. Also, you can mention us on Twitter, on Instagram, and we'll try to answer your question to the best of our knowledge and get back to you guys as quick as we can. Matt, any final words before we close it out?
I don't know, as well as on these sites, we'll be putting a little bio if you want to get to know us a little bit better, and we appreciate your support. And if we have any viewers or listeners, we appreciate it, and we hope you enjoy.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.